Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Major General Jagatbir Singh, retired, and on behalf of the Director General I welcome you all to the 20th edition of the Global Heat Map. Today, I will be discussing three issues, out of which one I will discuss in greater detail. The first issue is something which happened in Pakistan. The second issue is the Israel-Gaza crisis and how it's manifesting now as far as the ceasefire is holding out. And the third issue I'll discuss is regarding the Russia-Ukraine war. The first issue is Pakistan and the Baluch problem and their problem in the northwest frontier region, that is Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, continue to persist. Pakistan has not found things the way they envisaged when Taliban 2.0 came into power. In fact, things have taken an entirely unexpected and different turn, and now they are feeling the heat on their west. But Pakistan needs to do a lot to set its own house in order. The latest salvo that was fired was by Maulana Fazlur Rahman, who claimed that 5 to 7 districts of Baluchistan could soon announce liberation. And he said that UN will accord recognition to these districts and Pakistan will fail. Well, we've heard about Pakistan failing right from the time of its independence. In fact, soon thereafter. The fault lines in the state are too numerous to go into presently. But the renewed violence that is taking place in the Kurram region as well as in Baluchistan, where feuding tribals are locked in conflict with the locals over there as well as with the security forces, have shown that numerous ceasefires, particularly in Kurram, have not worked and violence has continued. As I've said earlier, there are festering wounds in Pakistan. They need to look inwards. And as Hillary Clinton very rightly pointed out many years ago, they should not forget the problems of rearing snakes in their backyard. The next issue I want to discuss is the Israel-Gaza ceasefire. Now, the ceasefire has been holding out to a degree. It ends on 1st of March, but yet there are no talks or anything in the open domain regarding phase 2 of the ceasefire, though we are given to understand by a statement from the United States that it will take place. But that's just speculation as far as most people are concerned, because the balance to be handed over now, after all the live hostages have been handed over in this phase, are 4 bodies. And you saw what happened regarding the body of Shiri Bibas, which they said was not her body. Finally, the correct body was handed back to the Israelis. The ceasefire is a fragile process, but what is sad is that, and that's where talks seem to have broken down, because yesterday, when 6 Israeli hostages were handed over, in return, the 600 plus Palestinians were not released from Israel and handed over to their and sent back to Gaza, and that has left a lot of people disappointed. Israel, of course, wants the complete disarmament of Hamas, whereas Hamas wants the Israeli troops to completely pull out from Gaza. So they are two widely differing, aspects which each party in this conflict wants. How much they will be able to achieve it is left for speculation. Israel, of course, is presently and has always been backed to a great degree by the United States. And in fact, the Israeli Prime Minister has recently credited the United States of sending key weapons to Israel in the last few weeks. Now, in a latest development which happened today, you can say, or yesterday, Israeli tanks entered into parts of the West Bank, that is in the area of Jenin, and that's for the first time after 20 years, Israeli tanks have entered there. The fighting so far in Gaza has cost the number of civilian casualties or number of casualties, I won't say civilian, number of casualties in Gaza has today touched 48,319. Now, in a related development to this, Prime Minister Netanyahu has also given a warning to Syria, to the HTS, by saying that HTS will not be allowed to move south of Damascus. So, this is an interesting time in the region of West Asia. The world is hoping that the ceasefire holds, the second round of ceasefire takes place, but the problems are not just stopping of the fire. The problems are there, far greater things that need to be resolved to get the peace in the region, and that's what it is. Because ceasefire without so-called justice for the Palestinian people, without resolving their underlying concerns, may not work. We have always said that the only way forward is a two-state solution so that both Palestinians and the Jews in Israel can live together side by side. Now, how this goes forward is what everybody is waiting and watching, and that is going to consume a lot of bandwidth as far as the strategic minds across the world are concerned. I do hope that we see some positivity as far as the Israel-Gaza ceasefire is concerned. But the next step after the ceasefire will be return of the people to the northern parts of Gaza, and then, of course, the major project of rebuilding of Gaza. So this is regards the present status of what happened last week as far as the Israel-Gaza peace initiative or ceasefire is concerned. Now, the next issue is linked to this. I talked to you about Syria, where Prime Minister Netanyahu had said this. There was a funeral held 2 days ago in Lebanon for Hassan Nasrallah and the other Hezbollah leaders who died over there. And when the funeral, there were a large number of people in the stadium. In fact, the stadium was packed. When this funeral procession was taking place, there were Israeli fighter jets circling the area on top. And the Israeli Minister Katz says that whoever threatens to destroy Israel and attack Israel will meet this end. So this is as far as the area of West Asia is concerned. Now, the other area which I'm going to focus on is the area of the Ukraine-Russia war. Now, what has happened today is very difficult to have been predicted or imagined few years ago. Today, we have entered the third year of the war, which started in 2000 Feb 2022. Today, 24th Feb 2025 marks the completion of 3 years of the war. And what is being visualized is that as the Russo-Ukrainian war approaches completes the third year, the conflict today is at a turning point. You saw what happened. People thought that it would just be a matter of weeks before the Russian army goes in and wraps up Ukraine. That never happened. The other school of thought after that was that a unified West against Russia, Russia doesn't stand a chance. There will be implosion in Russia. Putin will go. Sanctions will cripple Russia. Russia will not have the wherewithal to advance. But what has happened is that both sides have been locked in sort of an attritional battle. Both sides have taken heavy losses. The West has invested millions of dollars into arms and ammunition in this region. But Today, the both the armies are exhausted to a degree, and there has been no breakthrough which has been visible. Now, one of the election promises of President Trump was that what he termed, I will bring this ridiculous war to a close. Now, soon after taking over, in fact, he's been just little over a month into his presidency, and there have been a slew of measures announced from his side. But amongst the major changes was we see a shift in American policy, in US policy, towards Russia Ukrainian war. Amongst the things that have taken place is that firstly, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth gave some remarks at a NATO conference. Thereafter, President Donald Trump had a 90-minute telephone conversation with President Vladimir Putin, and the Vice President of America gave some, almost, not almost, showed European leaders the mirror when he spoke to them at the Munich Security Conference. So, these are huge things which have happened. In effect, what happened is that there's a widening rift between President Trump and President Zelensky, which is now evident. Trump has denounced Zelensky as a dictator without elections, and Zelensky has said that Trump was trapped in a Russian disinformation bubble in response to President Trump saying that Ukraine had started the war. Now, this sudden turn of events is something no one could have visualized. But more telling is a new security architecture is taking place in Europe, and the Europeans are being forced by President Trump when they were told emphatically by the Vice President Vance that they could no longer rely on transatlantic support, meaning that they would have to take responsibility to shoulder their own defense. What happened was that when Pete Hegseth spoke, three things he said very categorically. Firstly, he said that there will be it's unlikely that there will be that NATO will be able to recover its territory. And he said that was unrealistic. The second issue he said was that he ruled out the Ukrainian membership of NATO. And the third thing he said was there would be no US troops to enforce the peace in Ukraine, and that the troops who would be deployed there to enforce the peace would not be covered under Article 5. But when all this has taken place, the main sticking point is what are the security guarantees? Now, last week, there was a meeting in Riyadh. Now, imagine the pace of things which have happened so fast. There's a meeting in Riyadh which was attended by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and he was accompanied by Michael Waltz and Stephen Witkoff. That is the National Security Advisor and the person in charge for the envoy for the Middle East. And from the Russian side, Sergei Lavrov, their foreign minister, was present along with Yuri Ushkanov. So they've had the first lot of talks, and apparently the second set of talks is slated in Riyadh for the 25th. Now, what are the alternatives? What are they looking for? And I'd spoken to you earlier on this forum, and I said that when the earlier talks were taking place, it's very clear that the people behind these talks and to resolve the issue is going to be Russia and the US. Ukraine and Europe finds themselves out of these peace talks presently. So that's a major development. Now, will Europe be able to guarantee the security of Ukraine without American support? The answer, I feel, is not practical. What are the security guarantees? Nobody is clear, whereas the British Prime Minister has gone on record to say that he is willing to provide troops. The French president, who was earlier willing to provide troops, has now apparently had second thoughts. Poland, who was very vocal in their support for Ukraine and being an East European country with close borders, one of the closest borders to Russia, is again not keen on providing peacekeepers. So, I mean, this leaves it as who is going to hold this? How will security guarantees come about for Ukraine? Today, President Zelensky has gone on record and said that he will resign provided that Ukraine is given NATO memberships. In other words, as all analysts were saying, the best security guarantee for Ukraine is to become a member of the NATO, and this is what the Western analysts feel. And today, President Zelensky, in a way, has hinted at that, saying, I'll resign, give Ukraine membership, and then you can go ahead with the peace talks. Basically, he wants to be there, Ukraine wants to be there as for the peace talks, which is fairly logical. And he should be there. After all, the two parties to the conflict must be there in the peace talk. Now the Western leaders are saying that the two parties must be there for the peace talk when the peace talks were initiated in Saudi Arabia. But when the peace talks were to be held earlier in Switzerland, they felt no reason for Russians to be there. And they were conducting the peace talks. That means all the Western powers backing Ukraine were conducting peace talks with Ukraine. So this is where we stand as far as the Russia-Ukraine conflict is concerned. Nobody has any clarity as to where and when this peace will take place. But as I said earlier regarding the Israel-Gaza war, ceasing fire is relatively easy. The problem is how to resolve the deeper underlying issues, because all wars end at some time or the other. But what is important is how the ending determines the peace to follow. The end of World War II and the end of Cold War chartered a new course for the world and for Europe to follow. Now, what is the global architecture, security architecture that is going to be unveiled will have great implications for everybody. So, unfortunately, the complexities of the conflict preclude quick solutions. But regardless of the outcomes of the negotiation, the war in Ukraine has already changed the character of conflict around the world. Countries must adapt to the new realities on the battlefield. However, the credibility of the global leaders now depends on how soon and in what manner this conflict ends. Thank you and Jai Hind.